planet thinking. I mean, this is about planetary boundaries, and this is something that was certainly influential in the forestry, progressive forestry industry. And in fact, that concept was built into WBCSD's work around Vision 2050, which says, you know, by 2050 we have 9 billion people living well within the limits of the planet. So with our new president, Peter, who started in the 1st of January, I guess I should have realised something was up when he brought Johan to our member meeting in Montreux. And he didn't tell any of the staff that you were on the agenda, and he certainly didn't tell the company. So when we had the presentation, I could see people really taking notice, and as a staffer I was thinking, okay, we're onto something here. So, just so you know, there has been an MOU. It was announced yesterday between Stockholm Resilience Centre and Peter is adamant that certainly the work of WBCSD needs to be informed and driven by the science, resilient science around planetary boundaries. And we're only doing that so our member companies take this concept on as well. So it's going to be a very powerful drive. He told me this morning I was going to be the Managing Director of Natural Capital. So I was thinking, well, I better find out what natural capital is, but no, I don't understand that. So you have somebody who's very committed to this area, to this work. Just one or two comments. We're talking about who needs to act in this area. Well, obviously governments need to act in this area, and corporations need to act in this area, but there's another powerful group as consumers. Each of us need to recognise there's a planetary boundary. We need to change our consumption patterns, our what it is we're trying to achieve out of life if we're going to live within this safe space. And this issue of moving from profits to one about more around planets, moving from consumption to wellness and happiness, this actually came through in the think tank we ran earlier this week, where we were looking at how business and governments can change in terms of addressing biodiversity and ecosystem challenges. So, you know, it's about what we're really putting up there is a model for wellness and happiness. It is this 9 million people, but we need to change systems so that we can survive. So I think the consumers, we can never forget that we're keen, that we're a key part of this as well, informed by science. Okay, so Peter wrote down here what, why, when. We know the what, we know the why we need to act, we know when, which is now, and he said everything going forward now is about the how. This is about outcome-orientated strategies and outcome-orientated implementation. I always remember the first conversation I had with Peter. He came to my office and he said, I'm an accountant and I'm here to save the planet. And I always remember the accountancy jokes from Monty Python, so I burst out laughing. And he laughed as well, and he said, I'm serious. So I said, well, how will accountants do that? And he said, and you heard it, I'm a capitalist, I'm good at optimizing financial capital, very good at it, and that's what businesses are there to do, manage investors' assets at risk, managing the financial capital. He said, I just need to get as good at managing natural and social capital in an integrated way. And WBCSD is in addition to using this very powerful concept of resilient science and planetary boundaries, will be, and I'm sure this is inspired by the work of the SRC, we have a new program around integrated accounting and reporting. And Peter has a very ambitious 3 to 5 year program of having a rules-based approach to bringing social and ecological externalities onto balance sheets, and it needs to run in parallel with intergovernmental process that does this. And his thing is speed, urgency, priority, crisis. Well, not crisis, but speed, urgency, and priority. Let's move on this. So I'm really looking forward to working in this area. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. James.
Can we get that on tape?
Yes, I would like to invite Dr. Ashok Khosla to the panel. Did I see you here somewhere? Yeah, there. Yes, please, could you would like to join us?
Okay.
It's a pleasure to have you on the panel.
Thank you.
Yes. I would maybe you would like to see some words from your perspective and your experience. I know that social issues is one of the questions you find very interesting in this context. Please.
That would be too simplistic. I'm not sure it's social issues. It's human beings and their welfare, I would say, is what I'm concerned about. I'm sorry, I apologize for being late. I was chairing another meeting downstairs. Johan and I, and Anders Wiekman, the three of us have been working on this for quite some time. And, you know, I also belong to the top of Rome, and limits, the concept of limits, the metaphor of limits, had run out a little bit, out of steam. And the idea of the boundaries, the planetary boundaries, gave it a new life, in a sense, a new incarnation. And of course, you know, being a Hindu, I believe in incarnation, so reincarnation, in fact. And so I jumped onto this bandwagon because I realized that metaphor is at the heart of communicating and getting people to understand what it is that it's all about. So I've been working off and on with Johan and other people to see what are the implications of societal boundaries, what are the implications of economic boundaries, and particularly now in a world like this, what are the implications for political boundaries? Not political boundaries in a map, but political boundaries in the sense of who gets what at whose cost. Basic things. They say that you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. But you know, nobody ever asks who gets the omelet and who breaks the eggs, whose eggs get broken. And I think a large part of the problem of the world today is not only the question of efficient use of resources, which certainly it is, but also what happens to human beings in this process, the consumers that we're talking about, the individual citizens, and what happens to the power structures in the decision-making process. So basically, we've been looking at ways in which to extend this concept to cover the real issues that confront an average third world person in a poor rural economy. I find it easier to have an image of the person that I'm working with and working for, and I really conceive of it as an individual housewife in the central part of India, somewhere far away from any other location, without access to water, without access to livelihoods, without access to resources of any kind. And how do you make it possible? And there are millions of them in hundreds of millions. No, we're talking about billions. We're talking about billions of people in the world who don't have access to the basic dignities of life. So the boundaries which we are now talking about are concepts that are very easy to understand from the Western world point of view, because you mine yourselves into the ground, extracting resources, finishing off whatever there was in the way of fossil fuels and so on, all that. But for the poor people in villages, they never got there. They don't have the means to get this. And so if you want to imagine a world in 2050, frankly, obviously, there's nobody who's going to deny this. Depends on what kind of standard of living you're going to talk about. But for any decent standard of living, I don't see how it could be more than 2 or 3 billion, and maybe less. There is just too many signals today of the stresses that our planet is going through because of the consumption of resources, which is really a multiplication of the number of people in the standard of living. And if you look at that, whether you look at climate change, whether you look at acidification of oceans, whether you look at biodiversity loss, whether you look at species disappearing at a rate that we haven't seen since the death of the dinosaurs. We're in trouble, and people don't realize that. And to talk glibly about 7 billion people who can be supported is, I think, frankly, criminal. It's just not. It's either ignorant, total ignorance, or if you know anything about the way the world is today, it's undermining the future of our children. So I think we've got to be very careful in talking about these things without the interaction between the different boundaries. The boundaries being the boundaries of a woman's life, the boundaries being the boundaries of exclusion, the boundaries of lack of education, lack of access to health, whatever. And we see them every day. I mean, I work in rural India most of my life. That's my day job. I just come to these conventions to sort of come up for air so that I have a little oxygen and I go back again. But essentially, the real world out there is very, very tough for people. And it's going to get tougher if we think simplistically, because our systems are not designed to solve those problems. And those problems are upcoming. You know, most of the time, the equilibrium state of the stocks, food stocks in the world has been running for many, many decades at around 120, maybe 110 days of food stocks. Today we're running at about 50, 55. I mean, surely that must be frightening to somebody. Our water systems have totally broken down. They're just, people are really fighting over water now. The application of today's technologies to people's lives can temporarily improve them. And some of these technologies are wonderfully liberating. The cell phone has massively changed the lives of people for the better. But in order to do that, you're doing a lot of things to Mother Earth which are really very, very unhealthy. So it goes both ways. You can't improve the one without improving the other. And I believe a large part of this has to be done both in the north and the south. We have to choose patterns of living, consumption, production, that every religion believes in the golden rule, do unto others. I mean, the Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative is very simple. It says, you can't do something that you wouldn't be able to bear other people not doing. Now, we're not doing that. And at the moment, there are a few people hijacking virtually everything. And the social boundaries are going to hit them. Because sooner or later, people will really come up and say, I'm sorry, but we're not accepting it. So I think there are, I'm talking very generally and generically. As I said, my day job is actually very specific. I run a business which makes money out of serving the needs, basic needs of really poor people, people who earn $2 a day, making houses for them, helping them acquire the things to make houses for themselves, or toilets, or cook stoves, or water pumps, or whatever it is that they need. And so there's a lot of very specific, concrete things that you do, but I thought at this stage all I can talk about is a more general picture.
Thank you very much for those words. I would like now to the final speaker in the panel, Matthias Klum. If you could give some ideas and thoughts and elaborate on this discussion. Being a photographer, traveling all over the world, you have a you have visually seen changes, and you have been able to catch it in a very good manner with your photography. Also, I know I've been in contact with many locals. You have worked with a lot of people that are out there. So please, your ideas and thoughts of Planetary boundaries.
Thank you very much. I'm neither a doctor or professor. I'm sort of a black sheep on this board. But I've worked, nevertheless, for nearly 25 years all over the world, and many of the things we are discussing and looking at, not least here in Jeju at this summit, is something I have worked with in depth on the ground. So one can basically from my standpoint, utopia has become reality. What we try to stress and what we try to cast light on endless meetings, I have sort of seen from within. What's really saddening these days is that the life support systems that we are totally dependent on, regardless where we live, if we're in rural India or if we're in Uppsala in Sweden, where I come from, we are still dependent on nature one way or another, more or less so, and we have no other place to go, as we all know. But the strangest thing is that it seems like we had a plan B, but we don't. And I think we can talk about climate change, we can talk about the different planetary boundaries, but one boundary that's very absolute and cannot be negotiated is the loss of biodiversity, because it's very absolute, it's very concrete, and for example now with diminishing coral reefs, as you all know are dying, and 30% about are now dying or depleted. That affect roughly 400 million people, maybe more, and usually poor people that get most of their protein from coral reefs. So my job as a filmmaker and photographer and communicator is obviously to try to create a sense of urgency, but not in a non-defeatist way. I don't want you to run and hide. I want people individually to feel engaged with the fact that we can make a difference if we are smart and we work together. One thing that I find astonishing and that's quite, well, I think exhilarating with the work of IUCN is to try to build bridges or bridge the gap between the different boundaries and not silo think them. I find that all the solutions that I've seen on the ground, from my humble perspective, needs to be thought in that matter. Otherwise, we will never ever be able to resolve many of the issues. And since we're living in a state of connectivity, basically what we do in one world, in one part of the world affects another part of the world. And not until we understand this fully, I think we will be able to change things dramatically and drastically. So the sense of urgency is not there, basically, and I find it very, very upsetting. And I'm 1 week I'm with the blowpipe hunters in Borneo, and I see how their entire realm on the 3rd largest island in the world is being totally wiped out. One could argue that, well, that's bound to happen. We're bound to lose ethnic minorities. We're bound to sacrifice some things for the greater good of mankind. But so far, we have mainly lost everything, and we haven't benefited. I mean, obviously, we have if you look at, for example, gapminders, exciting, I'm sure you've all seen the little balls and the circles and balloons hopping along, and we're all doing great. Mankind has really achieved a lot. But at the same time, we've reached the level where nature cannot cope with that kind of excessive affluence behavior.
And he should integrate that.
Yes, he should. Yeah. Hans Rosling definitely should. Yeah, right. But this should all be common sense, and this is what's another really, I think, frightening. But it seems like common sense is very uncommon. So to me, as a photographer and filmmaker, going from this Tibetan to the Amazon to melting ice caps to the fact that I work with the coral reefs in the world, and I see how that affects people and planet, how it destabilizes our systems that that supports us and creates resilience for our species. I cannot understand how the sense of urgency cannot be there. That's why I think it's very important to go to the individual person, regardless if it's Angela Merkel or if it's a minister of finance or CEOs of big companies, because we cannot really wait for change to be legislated. We have to work in a multidisciplinary cross-border way. Otherwise, I think, being already behind schedule, it becomes more increasingly costly, our mistakes. So we need a mind shift. And we need to invest not only monetarily, we need to, I think, but what's very, very important is to basically elevate or reinvent a moral and ethical compass. And it's not there anymore. I find that also very, very disturbing. So I think that this might sound very, very 70s, very hippie-like, but I think that if we cannot understand what we do, that what we're doing today affects change for coming generations. I look at my children; they're 7 and 10, and when they said, "Dad, will there be coral reefs with colorful fish when we are in your age?" And I cannot say I can promise them that. I cannot tell them that they can go to Borneo or the Amazon and listen to the woolly monkeys in the Amazon or the gibbons in Borneo and wake up to the bubbling cries, because they might not be there. And this is the legacy we are here to discuss. And it's so easy to hide behind figures and documents and nice and interesting meetings all over the world. But this is actually what it boils down to. This is our only resource, and we're not taking care of it.